At home, my aunt, whom I lived with, saw my conditions were worsening. She had tried all kind of way to make me well again, but then she realized she couldn't handle it anymore by herself. She had tried many hospitals and meeting many doctors to tell her the problem with me, and to give me appropriate remedy, but it was all in vain. Doctors could not see anything wrong with me by then. They thought maybe I was having cerebral malaria and perhaps had little rest, which was not enough for my brain system. The doctors tried all that they could, but still they did not find anything wrong in my body, or with me. They simply prescribed some medicines and told my aunt that I should only have enough rest. She stopped looking for me a doctor, and decided to take me back to my village where my mother lived. She gave me somebody, who escorted me back to my mother's place with instructions. She said my mother should try her best to find me solution to my problem as quick as possible, so that I could return to school while I am well. When I was back to my village at my mother's home, my mother saw me, and was filled with so much pity for me. She was so grieved by my terrible condition, so worried about me, but I had no way to stop her from worrying. She thought of what she would do to make me well again, but there nothing she could find. My mother is a woman who really lived a humble life. She depends on the crop she grows for everything, and she really didn't have any money for hospital bill or for anything that required money. She wondered how she would help me. As she wondered, I asked her to take me to any church around where I hoped to find true healing and answers to my prayers and pleadings to God. She listened to me and she arranged me to my aunt's place, who lived just nearby her place. My aunt's sister to my father was very well known to be devoted woman of God, and her own home was known as a place of prayer. She was the aunt who mentored me to live a prayerful life, and to love God, and had always loved me as her own son. Before I was taken to the city by my uncle, when I was brought to her place by my mother, my aunt was shocked by my condition. When she saw me and was told I was sick, she was filled with sympathy for me. When she saw how miserable I looked, in around 6 p.m. she asked me to come at the prayer ground which was at her compound. She told me to kneel down and open my heart to God in prayer. I did as she instructed. She stood before me, where I knelt and began to pray. As she prayed I fell down, then I got up, because I thought I didn't kneel steadily, but when I was up on my knees again, I fell on the ground for the second time, but this time, I realized I kinda lost conscious and fell down, and I didn't know how. I was beginning to fear. I got up again, and while I was up again, I suddenly fell down, but this time I didn't get up. Instead I began to shout and screaming very loudly, kicking my legs, and my whole body was moving with a mind of its own. I had no control over it. As this was going on I realized I was not the one controlling the shout or the screaming or even the kicking and unnecessary body movement. Something inside my body was using my body to do all the shout, the screaming and the movements. I was extremely scared that I thought it was the end of me being alive. This I had never experienced it before in the whole of my entire life I had lived on earth. As my aunt was praying and calling upon God as power in heaven, I realized it was the demons inside me. They had possessed me. My whole body was making movement, which were completely out of my control. In my life, I had never believed demons were real or existed and possessed people, but from that day on I realized demons were so real and possessed people. My aunt asked the demons how many they were, but they answered they were 10 in number. As my aunt prayed she was commanding the demons to leave my body as soon as possible, as she called fire from heaven to burn them. The process of prayer went on until midnight. I remained at my aunt's place for several days being prayed for by my aunt every day. Every time as my aunt went on to pray for me, I felt something else besides being demon-possessed. There was something like a hard rock inside my head. That thing was causing a lot of painful pressing inside my brain. It attempted me to cut and separate my head into 2 parts and remove what was pressing my brain system, but it was impossible. After a amount of staying at aunt's home, because I was being prayed for, my mother came for me at my aunt's place, and took me to a certain man, who had the power to remove physical object from people's body. These physical objects are real objects like broken glass, stone, bones, plastics, razor blades, which are forced into people's body through the power of witchcraft, to inflict pain and torture to the victims, and to kill those wanted dead. It was discovered I was also a victim. I had not known of these facts until I was taken to that man. I myself really had no belief witchcraft really existed or even real. People talked about witchcraft around me, but I had refused to accept that witchcraft was real, and that people really die of witchcraft many times. It was when I was taken to that man that I obtained the understanding and knowledge of the existence of witchcraft. When my mother and I arrived at that man's place, the man made me to open a Bible page randomly, but first I had to make a small prayer. I opened it as instructed, and gave the Bible to him without closing where I opened. He took the Bible, and begun reading it, but to my surprise, he wasn't reading exactly the word in the Bible that was written. He was reading while looking at that page, but the words were from his mind. The words he mentioned were invisible for me from the page he was reading. It was coming to him spiritually. In his reading he mentioned that I had been bewitched, that many deadly witchcraft drugs had been planted at home in our compounds and surrounding environment, as traps to bring my family down and me inclusive, and that these deadly demonic drugs needed to be removed so that my family could be safe. Many things he said that I even mentioned. After he had read from the Bible, I saw him bring a small bucket with warm water, and I saw him use small piece of cloth and dip it into the warm water, and squeezed it and place the piece of cloth on the belly of one of the lady's baby, who was also there for treatment. I saw him squeeze the baby's belly, as if he was searching for something from the baby's belly. I saw him lift his hand from the baby's belly, but as he lifted his hand from the belly I realized there was a very big piece of broken glass, which looked very sharp, being lifted from the baby's belly. I thought to myself, what is this man doing to the baby's stomach holding a broken glass? I had no idea he was remover of objects from people's body, and that he was actually doing his work. I had never seen such a work before, nor did I know about it. I was just getting to know about it. The baby who was worked on was crying a lot ever since they arrived with it at that man's place, but when the man worked on the baby stopped crying and began breastfeeding quietly. I saw another small boy a little older than the first baby, and was able to walk. The man used the piece of cloth, as before, and placed on the boy's body. He removed 2 folded polythene bag. Then I saw him work on another boy of about 10 years old. This boy was unable to walk or even stand on his own feet. Those who brought him were the one giving him this support. The man removed 2 black substances, which are commonly found at the inner center of a radio cell. I was the 4th person the man worked on. When he was working on me, he placed his piece of cloth on my head, as he did to other, and begun searching, and one had located the object inside. He struggled while pitching my head and suddenly removed a very big snail shell. I was greatly surprised by the scene. I was also very scared about what I saw. Nevertheless, when we opened and looked inside the snail shell, there was dry grounded weed, which were drugs, and then was blocked from pouring out the shell with a piece of black polythene bag. I wondered, how did the snail shell enter into my head? I had never noticed or witnessed such a thing before in the whole of my life on earth. I couldn't doubt, because I saw with my very eyes what this man did. From that very moment I realized witchcraft really existed, and was very real, and that many people die from witchcraft. This thing was going to kill me too if it was not removed. I was so grateful to God I have received some relief, though there are many things I faced afterward. There were many other forms of witchcrafts I learned of later on,